Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Ethicast, coming to you live from the 14th Annual Global Ethics Summit in Atlanta, Georgia. Hi, everyone. It's Bill Coffin coming to you again live from the Global Ethics Summit. We're in day 3 of the event, and it's been just a content extravaganza thus far. I'm with my co-host, RT Maharaj, and we're going to talk with you a little bit about some of the great sessions that have been happening over the course of the day. RT, how's it been?
It's been great, Bill. It's just so much to unpack, right? So we just heard we had a couple of breakout sessions, but to kick us off this morning, we had a board conversation on today's risk. That panel featured Kristen Hill, partner at Morrison Forrester, along with speakers on the panel, Veena Lukundi at Rockwell Automation, Georgette Kaiser from Aflac, and also Linda Smith-Galipo at WSB. I thought it was really interesting. They spoke about skills, resources, areas you need to tap into in order if you want to look into probably becoming a board of director in the future.
Absolutely.
So much going on. Go ahead.
No, it was a terrific conversation. Veena in particular, I thought said something really fantastic when she mentioned how over the weekend, in fact, The Weeknd and Drake did not drop a single together. That was simply an example of generative AI fooling the entire internet. But she really tied it into how that technology is going to pose an extraordinary challenge and opportunity for compliance ethics conference, the compliance ethics community going forward. So I thought it was a really terrific thing. And they also talked about AI and cybersecurity in general. And there's a really great comment about how they said that a lot of people, especially at the board level, are consciously incompetent in the cybersecurity arena. And it really talked about how going forward, we might see a lot more chief information security officers ascend to the board level to be able to address this really incredible risk. So fantastic session.
And one point you also mentioned is that you have to tap into your superpowers. Every company has unique superpowers, and this is something you need to tap into, you need to use, you need to refresh, and you need to always rethink ways that you can improve on your superpowers. So I felt that was pretty interesting. Veena also mentioned agility and resilience, and I felt like the panel had a lot to say on those two areas, which are two important pieces of the entire puzzle. So I felt that was very, very interesting. They also spoke about ESG. I felt there was certainly a lot there for us to talk about, for sure.
Yeah. The ESG conversation this whole morning has really been fantastic. We've been seeing a very high level, very strategic look at what ESG really is, what it means, and coming back to some key themes that have emerged over the course of the entire Global Ethics Summit, which is basically using ESG as a value creator, ESG as an interesting way for the ethics compliance officers to get an unexpected ally from the board level, and using the board's superpower, if we can use that parlance again, to really affect change from their point of view, because they see this from the aspect of creating value, not just minimizing risk, and making a more sustainable enterprise going forward. So that was a really interesting piece of tactics and strategy, I think, for the community to take away from that.
And also, I thought it was interesting that they looked at the other side, the competing interests for ESG and having pushback. I felt like they addressed that pretty well. Yeah.
Quite well. And one thing I thought was terrific was the mention of, there's the ESG backlash as we see it in the realm of headlines, right? And clickbait. And then there's the notion of, well, what is the real pushback for ESG at the board level? And they're mentioning how at the board level, there is simply not this binary notion of ESG or no ESG. That's not a meaningful conversation whatsoever. It's really about, yes, ESG is table stakes. We need to have it as part of our strategy. But really, the important thing is, what is it doing to make us a better business? How is it going to make us, better serve our clients? And looking at it from the point of view of a power maximizer, if you will, rather than simply as an obligation or as a distraction. Fascinating conversation.
It was great. And to move that point further, Linda Smith from WSB spoke about being inspirationally irritating.
Yes.
Yes, I thought that was interesting, and I will hold on to that. I feel that that was a good one.
Absolutely. And once again, it spoke to to the unique power that the board has to affect change very, very swiftly. It's hard when we talk about tone from the top. We kind of often overlook how the board can really have a massive effect on a C-level decision-making apparatus. When the board decides, look, we're going to make our presence known, the chief executives will listen, and suddenly you can affect massive change in the organization by getting the ear of the board. And that conversation in particular was a great proof point that the board is listening to things very much a 360 orientation. And I thought it was really fantastic. And a lot of things that we've been talking about at the Global Ethics Summit, a lot of the topics that are top of mind amongst chief ethics and compliance officers, turns out the boards are listening. The boards are knowing, and they're quite interested in these things. So being able to make that connection between ethics and compliance and the board, that's only going to bring great things for the organization.
And I do have one question for you, though.
Yeah.
How would you define inspirationally irritating? Would you define that as sitting next to me for the past 3 days? It's inspirationally irritating. How exactly would you define
Sitting
that?
next to you has been a revelation. No, I would describe inspirationally irritating as the tactics I use to get my kids to clean up after themselves.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's fair.
Exactly.
I feel we'll be hearing more about that over the next couple of months for sure.
Indeed. But you know what? Over the course of the morning, we had some other great, really wonderful interviews. I managed to have some time where I got to sit down with Jeff Martin, partner at Baker McKenzie, where we were able to discuss recent DOJ pronouncements on enforcement priorities and compliance, especially in the realm of sanctions and export compliance. And he was talking very much about how, especially with the war in Ukraine, with Russia's invasion of Ukraine, that sanctions landscape changed really radically, and there was a whole raft of sanctions that were put down, but they turns out that people were finding ways to sidestep them. So the second wave of all that is that first came the sanctions, now comes the enforcement to make sure that those who are deciding to not comply will actually be forced to comply. And so there's a twin fork of the actual enforcement mechanisms that are coming into play, new enforcement expectations, and then just a ramped up level of activity on the enforcement front as well. And so that's making the sanctions area, it's very, very interesting as always. And I think, we've always had a focus on sanctions, but right now that heat is not going away anytime soon. So a terrific conversation with Jeff. Really I'm very happy to speak with him on that.
Yeah, and yesterday I actually spoke with Pete Tomczak, partner at Baker McKenzie, and we spoke a little bit more about best practices in investigations. And I felt like that was such a great conversation as well.
Indeed.
We always depend on Baker McKenzie and the team across at Baker McKenzie to share their insights with us, and we always appreciate it for sure.
Absolutely.
And folks, apologies for the noise in the background. This is between sessions, so certainly we are moving away a little bit, looking up, saying hi to our friends who we've spent the last 2 days with. So forgive us, but we are still here and present in the moment.
Exactly. It's lively as ever here at the Global Ethics Summit. The energy here is fantastic, and we just love it. Another conversation I had this morning was with Alex Vanderwall of Morrison Forster, and we
ethical AI.
About ethical AI, yeah. And it was a great conversation. And the thing about that was how little we actually know about AI and about the risks involved. And he was talking very much about how we're in a state where we can't actually have any definitive answers on this. This is sort of a matter of acknowledging the risks and the opportunities that AI is going to provide, especially on the legal front, and getting our ducks in a row, getting our infrastructure laid in place so that as it continues to evolve at the rapid pace we've seen it at, we'll be able to keep up with it. He had compared about how, a lot of the conversation about AI, generative AI, these conversations are less than a year old. And this technology went from 0 to 60 in very, very quick time, and is exploding in a way that we really can't anticipate. And I think that was a great frame on that, and discussing how there's the common conversation about AI, and then there's the deeper, more disciplinary discussion about AI that really kind of gets at, well, what does it really mean for us on a business front and on a compliance and ethics front as well.
And I feel on the compliance side, it's certainly a journey for everyone here, because while we touch on it, we did not get the chance to do a deep dive. And Alex really took that moment and really focused in on it. And I'm sure we're going to hear more from Alex over at Morrison Forster. That was Alex Vanderwolf, partner at Morrison Forster, who will actually share more on that topic with us probably over the next couple of weeks.
Absolutely. And then we have some more great content coming to you later on this morning. If there's one session you do not miss in the entire Global Ethics Summit, it's going to be increasing enforcement efforts and what that means for evaluating compliance programs. I am so excited for this session. It's going to be absolutely fantastic.
And that will be moderated by our very own Leslie Benton at Ethisphere. And that is coming up at 11:40 directly after this Ethicast. It will end at 12:30 p.m. Eastern time. So that is certainly a strong way to end the Global Ethics Summit.
Oh my gosh,
I am so excited for that session.
Well, it's going to be terrific because speaking at it, we're going to have Matt Axelrod, Assistant Secretary for Export Enforcement at the Bureau of Industry and Security, U.S. Department of Commerce, and we're going to have Glenn Leon, Chief of the Fraud Section at the U.S. Department of Justice Criminal Division. So that's going to be a high-powered conversation. I can't think of anybody better to lead this conversation than Leslie.
Yeah.
And it's going to be super substantive. So definitely tune in for that. It's going to be an outstanding way to end an outstanding Global Ethics Summit. So,
and when we come back, we'll be debriefing a little bit and unpacking everything that came out of that conversation.
that's right. So make sure to stay tuned. We'll see you after the next session. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you all. See you.